Bonafide Reformer, Episode 1 Abolishing Inheritance Tax. In the vast and often stifling web of taxation that grips the British economy, inheritance tax, or IHT, stands as one of the most resented. Reform UK's proposal in this year's contract with you to abolish IHT for estates under 2 million while levying a reduced 20% tax on those above with an option to donate to charity is not only politically astute but a necessary recalibration of Britain's outdated fiscal framework. This is not simply a populist gesture but a well-considered policy that balances fairness, economic growth and the incentivisation of philanthropy. Inheritance tax is commonly justified as a measure to prevent the hoarding of wealth across generations. Yet, this idealistic narrative collapses under scrutiny, especially in modern Britain, where skyrocketing property prices have pushed even modest estates well into the IHT threshold. A tax originally designed to target the ultra-wealthy now burdens families who, through no fault of their own, find themselves caught in its web. Reform UK's policy recognises that a significant proportion of estates, particularly those under 2 million, do not represent excessive wealth, but rather the fruits of a lifetime of work, prudence and aspiration. The average house price in London, for example, hovers around £690,000, meaning that even modest family homes can edge estates perilously close to the IHT threshold. This has led to an increasing number of families being forced to sell homes and liquidate assets to meet the punitive 40% tax. Reform UK's proposal would liberate these families from the unfair obligation to hand over nearly half of their loved one's legacy to the state, restoring a sense of justice to Britain's fiscal policy. One of the most compelling aspects of this proposal is the introduction of a 20% rate on estates over 2 million, alongside the option to donate to charity instead. This policy strikes an elegant balance. On the one hand, it acknowledges the state's need to generate revenue from the wealthiest estates, ensuring that there remains a form of wealth redistribution. On the other hand, it offers those same estates the freedom to support causes that align with their values through charitable donations, a far more dignified outcome than the crude appropriation of private wealth by the state. This measure encourages philanthropy, a virtue that should be promoted in a flourishing society. Allowing individuals to direct part of their estate to charitable causes introduces a more moral dimension to taxation. It also aligns with Britain's tradition of civic responsibility, where private wealth is used to support public good, be it through the arts, education or social services. In this, Reform UK wisely avoids the punitive anti-success mentality of the left, while still encouraging the redistribution of wealth through voluntary charitable channels. International comparisons offer further support for Reform UK's policy. Many nations that have abolished or significantly reduced their inheritance taxes have seen positive economic and social outcomes. Sweden, for instance, abolished its inheritance tax in 2005 and saw no noticeable decline in state revenues from other forms of taxation. Instead, its economy grew as wealth was reinvested into businesses, property and philanthropy. Similarly, Australia and New Zealand have long rejected inheritance tax, with no discernible rise in inequality or reduction in public service quality. The lesson here is clear. Abolishing punitive inheritance taxes does not undermine economic fairness. Rather, it liberates capital to be used in ways that stimulate growth, increase charitable giving, and reward hard work and investment. It creates a healthier relationship between the state and its citizens, one based on respect for personal achievement rather than resentment and confiscation. At its heart, the abolition of IHT for estates under 2 million is a policy rooted in a fundamental belief in personal responsibility and family sovereignty. The notion that the state has the right to confiscate a substantial portion of an individual's lifetime earnings simply because they have passed away is profoundly undemocratic. It undermines the family unit, which should be the bedrock of a stable and prosperous society. By taxing inheritance at such an exorbitant rate, the state is effectively punishing those who seek to provide for their families after death. Reform UK's policy reflects a return to a philosophy of governance that respects the individual, the family, and the freedom to pass on one's legacy. It is a recognition that wealth creation should not be seen as a zero-sum game, where the success of one individual necessitates the failure of another. Instead, it encourages a view of society where success is celebrated, where wealth is reinvested into the next generation and into charitable causes that benefit all. Critics will undoubtedly argue that abolishing IHT for estates under 2 million exacerbates inequality. Yet, this argument misunderstands the nature of wealth distribution in Britain. Reform UK's policy does not protect billionaires or oligarchs, it targets the middle class, whose wealth is primarily tied up in property. The policy is a safeguard against the state's growing tendency to tax ordinary families out of their homes, ensuring that estates of moderate value can pass to future generations without being decimated by government levies. Moreover, the 20% tax on estates over 2 million ensures that the ultra-wealthy still contribute their fair share, while the charitable option promotes a culture of giving. Far from increasing inequality, this policy fosters a more organic and voluntary form of wealth distribution, one based on generosity rather than state coercion. Reform UK's policy is both economically sound and morally just. It reflects a belief in personal freedom, family sovereignty, and the incentivisation of philanthropy. By freeing ordinary families from the punitive burden of IHT while still ensuring that the wealthy estates contribute either through tax or charity, Reform UK offers a policy here that aligns with the values of fairness, responsibility, and opportunity. This is not merely a tax cut. It's a return to the principles of liberty and fairness that have long underpinned Britain's success. Reform UK's vision for abolishing IHT is a bold and necessary step towards a more prosperous, generous and free society. By supporting this policy, Reform UK reaffirms its commitment to a Britain where success is rewarded, not penalised, and where families are free to provide for future generations without the overreach of the state. This was first published as an X article on Tuesday the 15th of October 2024.